and running on a Friday on the Krueg Show. Good morning to everybody. Happy November 10th, wherever you're at. 10:49 on the West Coast. That means it's almost 2 o'clock on the East Coast. And Chase Sr. with us on our Friday spot now on the regular, and it's great to see you. Chase, welcome to the show. How you doing, man? How's your Friday?
Doing awesome. We hit 100,000 subscribers yesterday on the 49ers report, so that was a pretty cool milestone. We're going to continue to provide everybody with some great coverage, and it's awesome to see some good reviews from me and you linking up, because this has been a blast the last couple of Fridays, and I'm looking forward to keeping it going.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about your 100,000, man. I mean, when did you start covering the 49ers? And I mean, for Chat Sports to have 100,000 people on your show, 100,000 subscribers, that is big stuff, man.
It's pretty surreal. Yeah, I was walking around the office yesterday after we hit that number because we went live for it. We were about 10 away, and then during the live show, we eclipsed 100,000, and people are looking at me in the office, my coworkers, and they're like, the 100,000 subscriber man. And this is the fourth channel under the Chat Sports umbrella to kind of reach that milestone. But I started covering the Niners back in April of 2021. My first official show is actually on draft night when San Francisco drafted Trey Lance. It feels as though that was so long ago. So this is my third season now, I guess, on the beat covering this team on the daily. And it's not something that I take lightly for an organization that's been able to win 5 Super Bowls. And then one of the cool things about the show, and I know you see this as well, you're able to reach people not just like in every pocket of America. This is a worldwide thing because people worldwide watch YouTube. So it's been cool to kind of gather people together to a certain degree.
Well, let's share the moment here. This is you on Twitter putting this out. This is from yesterday. We get the volume going there. Here we go.
Yeah!
Pretty electric. Somebody's hitting a gong in the background. It's just mayhem.
You guys are like soccer hooligans.
Yeah, exactly.
Very nice. Very nice. Cool moment, man. You guys got a lot of people working on that show, or is that just the entire Chat Sports crew for everybody?
That's some of the Chat Sports company. What's crazy is that I started in March of 2021 at the company Chat Sports, and I took over the Niners beat in April. I was the 8th employee hired then, and we've just been on this rocket ship. Now I think we have 25 employees. We have another office in Cincinnati in addition to Dallas here. So the growth of the company has been insane, and I've kind of been a part of that since I came here, and I've been able to see it. We've had a couple of office renovations to extend space. So that was a part of the crew, and obviously the crew is a big reason why the show has been able to grow so much.
Since we're sharing the screen, one of the first things I want to get into is I want to get into just the question of this matchup between the Jaguars and the 49ers. And there's a lot of people, I mean, I understand where people who say, hey, man, the Jaguars are rolling. They should be favored. It shouldn't be the Niners favored. The Jaguars are the team that hasn't lost in a long time. The Niners haven't won in about a month. The Niners haven't led for the last month. The Jaguars haven't trailed for the last 5 games. Now, I unfortunately bet on them when they went against Houston, and Houston beat them down pretty good. And then since that point, they have not lost, and it's really incredible to watch. I want you to – this was on Good Morning Football, though, this morning. Tell me what you think of this. We'll watch just a minute of this. This is Kyle Brandt, and, I mean, as a Niner fan, it makes me want to climb through the TV and slap him around, but he makes some decent points. Here it is. Oh, wait. Might as well put the audio up there. What do you think? That was on Good Morning Football on the NFL Network today, or maybe yesterday. What do you think? I mean, does he have a point? Is the wrong team favored? The 49ers are favored on the road against a Jacksonville team that's rolling, and the Niners have struggled on both sides of the ball in the last month. What do you make of the spread in this game?
Couple of takeaways there. I think it's a little bit rich for him to say the Jaguars are a great team and the Niners are not a good team. I still think San Francisco, even though they've lost 3 games in a row, are a really solid ball club. And on the offensive and defensive side of the field, San Francisco has a bunch of dogs. They just haven't played good football in over a month, to Kyle Brandt's point. But there's that saying out there, and I know you're a betting man, Larry. I am as well. Vegas always knows. And I think that 49er fans are going to pack the crib there in Jacksonville. It's going to kind of be one of those environments in which the road fans are able to make a lot of noise. And I like Jacksonville. I am from Philadelphia. I know Doug Peterson very well and big fan of what he was able to do in Philadelphia, winning a Super Bowl in year 2. Always has his teams peaking at the right time when he has a quality roster where they start to play their best ball in November and December. They don't peak early like San Francisco's been able to do this year. I do think the Jags are the 3rd best team in the AFC. They have a really good roster. Trevor Lawrence, he's legit. He's one of the highest graded quarterbacks in the NFL at passes of 20-plus yards. He also has a lot of weapons at his disposal as well. Christian Kirk's a good player. They don't use Calvin Ridley enough, but he can pop off at any moment. And their tight end, Evan Ingram, very solid player. And then Travis Etienne is kind of able to impact the game through the air and on the ground as one of those Swiss Army knives, a Christian McCaffrey light type of player. And then on the defensive side of the football, I actually think they're very well coached. I think their scheme can cause some problems. They have a good defensive line that can get after the quarterback. But I think why Vegas has the Niners as favorites here is that people aren't quite sold on the Jags resume here, because if you look at what they've done this year as far as their wins and losses, they beat the Colts week 1 31-10. Then they lost to the Chiefs in a hard-fought game in week 2 17-9. So 1-score loss to KC, not a bad L there. And then they lost to the Texans 37-17. You alluded to that earlier, but they beat the Falcons. They beat the Bills in London, beat the Colts, the Saints, and the Steelers. So the best quarterback that they've really beat so far this year, can you tell me one? They haven't really beaten an elite quarterback. And yeah, I don't know if Brock Purdy can be classified as an elite quarterback, but this San Francisco 49ers defense has had a couple of weeks to try to get things together. Steve Wilkes is going to be on the sideline. Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw on that podcast together. They think that they can solve some of their defensive deficiencies, and we're going to see the debut of Chase Young, and hopefully this pass rush is going to be able to get home. So I think all of those things kind of factor into why this is a 3-point line here, but this is not going to be an easy game for San Francisco. Jacksonville's a formidable opponent, and if they're playing in the AFC Championship game in January, won't surprise me at all, because right now I think it's Chiefs, Bengals, and Jags, and I think those 3 teams are pretty closely tied in the AFC. Buffalo after that.
Yeah, I mean, this Jacksonville team's got a lot of speed. Lawrence has thrown it underneath a lot to the tight end Ingram, but Etienne, Ingram, Ridley, Christian Kirk, all these guys can run. And then on defense, I mean, they've got 2 elite edge guys in Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, the former first pick of the 2022 draft. And then that inside combo of Devin Lloyd and Foye Aluakan is just, Aluakan is just crazy. He just makes a million tackles. And on the back end, they get Tyson Campbell, who might be their best defensive back. Darius Williams has been a thorn to the Niners going back to the Rams days. So I think Jacksonville's really good on both sides of the ball. I think it's going to take a monumental effort. I do think the 49er D-line with Chase Young should be able to overpower Jacksonville's offensive line. But if the ball's coming out really quick, then it's about what kind of coverage is Steve Wilkes' defense going to play. Let's talk about Wilkes for a second, because that became one of the subplots, is that Shanahan decided he's going to move Wilkes from the booth to the field. Shanahan ironically said that he himself prefers to be in the booth than on the field, but he felt like that Wilkes, that obviously they felt like there was some either miscommunication or not enough FaceTime with the linebackers specifically, according to Shanahan, and he wants Wilkes down on the field. I mean, I beg the question. I mean, is Wilkes being in a different seat for the game going to make their coverage tighter? Is he going to make them miss fewer tackles? Is he going to help their D linemen get off blocks and clog holes? I mean, up front, I mean, I don't know. Is this window dressing, or do you think this is something that actually may have an impact?
I think it could have a little bit of an impact, and I know some people were trying to play it down, and I totally understand that viewpoint, but I just think that in life, in sports, in business, face-to-face communication, eye contact, it's really important in trying to get messages across. You can look at somebody's eyes and you can kind of read their body language a little bit. You can see their tone with their facial expression. Their body language can really be telling as far as if they're happy, if they're mad. And it's one thing to be communicating with the Fred Warner if you're Steve Wilks from a headset. It's another to try to make these adjustments in person. And this is also new for this Kyle Shanahan regime because no coordinator had been in the booth calling defensive plays since Kyle Shanahan was hired in 2017. So this was something new. It also allows Shanahan to just walk over and have that communication with Steve Wilks in person. And I think that I kind of go back to like the COVID era, right? When, I was working at a news station in Pennsylvania and I didn't see my coworkers, some of them for months. I couldn't have a face-to-face conversation with my boss. And it would have been nice to just go into his office and to be able to talk to him. Instead, it's like, hey, can we set up a Zoom call at some point this day? It just makes everything a little bit more arduous. Now, that all can be true. At the same time, San Francisco can't miss 32 tackles like they did in that 3-game losing streak. Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw can't miss more than 30 tackles combined, as you've pointed out throughout this season. San Francisco has had this inability to get after the quarterback, and because of that, Joe Burrow and Kirk Cousins combined to go, 63 of 77 in the last 2 games. The front has to be tied to the secondary, and it hasn't been. San Francisco also offensively, they turned the ball over 7 times over the last 3 games. So it's a combination of trying to find solutions to the problem, and that's what they're trying to do here with Steve Wilks. I don't think they're making him a scapegoat. He even admitted, I'm built for this. I could do a better job. We haven't been playing well enough. This run defense is 26th in the NFL right now after it was first and second under D'Amico Ryans, and they're trying to figure things out to end this 3-game losing streak. Also, at the same time, players have to do their job and they have to execute a little bit better, because when you're paying $92 million to Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, and Javon Hargrave, and you're tied for 18th in the NFL with 18 sacks through 8 games, that's not good enough either.
Yeah, no question about it. And it's funny, I was down there yesterday and I asked Greenlaw about Wilks moving, and he's like, first of all, Wilks kind of poo-poos it. He's like, hey, man, it's no big deal, and people are making more of this than it really is. And that's probably true. But when I asked Greenlaw about it, he's like, look, we got all the same calls as we had last year. We're just not making the plays. Yeah. And it ain't on Steve. It's on us. And I agree. I think it's more of a personnel thing. I know you do tons of broadcasting, Chase. Do you have time to watch film and to study these teams on the film? Or is the film, some people are into the film, other people aren't. And to me, I don't judge either way. But where do you fit? Where do you sit as far as film watching throughout the week?
No, I definitely like to watch film because I do think that it provides a foundational element to how I can form my opinions and my own analysis. So I do like to watch film, and I like to kind of combine that with like what I'm seeing with my own eyes. And that's kind of how I approach analytics as well. Analytics are great. And if I was running a business, I'm in an analytical business right now. I take a look at YouTube analytics every single day because my raise at work and the success of the channel all built on numbers, right? So if you're running a business and you have access to numbers that can help your bottom line, you would be stupid to ignore some of those clear trends that can really impact that bottom line. But there has to be some gut feel to it. And you have to go with what you believe deep down could be the right decision as well. And you're not just going to solely change all of your business practices just because the analytical trends are telling you that. So I'm an open-minded person. I like to play things down the middle, and I believe that context can change opinions. And I do think that film study is very important as well.
I do too. I think, there are times when you can go so far down the rabbit hole that you're not seeing what you think you're seeing because you're watching so much of it. But I think you got to watch a baseline of it just to get a sense of what you're looking at. And like, give you an example, coming off the bye week, I've got the NFL Plus. I watched the All 22 on Jacksonville against Pittsburgh. I took their last 3 or 4 games going back to the Houston game. And I just wanted to see what they're doing exactly and how they're moving the ball, how they're stopping teams. I'm going to share this screen again on the Brian Baldinger, because I think if you say Jacksonville, you think of Trevor Lawrence, you think of Etienne, you may think of Calvin Ridley, but in reality, it's not those guys.
Niners get ready
to
head to Duval this weekend.
This is Baldy talking a little bit about Evan Ingram, and this is exactly what I'm seeing. If you watch Evan Ingram, now he was a good player at Ole Miss. He was drafted by the Giants. A lot of people thought he was going to have a bust-out career. It didn't happen in New York, but he's always had big-time speed. He now winds up in Jacksonville. They've lined him up 129 times. He's been their leading target, but he's been in the slot 411 times and online 129 times. This is how they're using Evan Ingram. Take a look at this.
Niners get ready to head to Duval this weekend. Like, they already know that no matter what you try to do to Trevor Lawrence, he's going to be as tough as anybody on the field. He's going to take that shot because he wants to get the ball down the field to Christian Kirk. But when they need a play, like right here on 3rd and 3, they're looking for Evan Ingram. Like, he's just going to sit down right in his zone, ball's coming right to him. All right, you pick up 5, you move the sticks. Like, their playmaker, right here, Patrick Peterson's going to cover him. It's going to be a clear out for Evan Ingram. All right, 3rd and 5, he wins the route, ball comes to him. It happens over and over again. Like, here you get this motion. So he kicks it out. Here you go. 2nd and 8, play action. You get on a pop pass over the middle. And then this. You watch this right here. Pittsburgh's in man coverage. Here goes Evan Ingram in motion. Here comes the safety dropping down, all right, to cover him. Like, as soon as they see this, they're like, oh, yeah, we got this, because he's going to run right away from everybody. Like, he runs well, really well in the open field. And big chunks come when Evan Ingram gets the ball on short passes and long runs.
There you go. This is what I kept seeing over and over and over again watching the Jaguar film in the last month. This is the weapon that has to be stopped. And this is kind of the weakness for the Niners. They may get a rush, but as you saw there, you got a tight end flexed out that's moving all over the formation, trying to seek mismatches. Peterson's a good offensive coach, and they're trying to give Lawrence that safety valve on every play, and he can just dump it to him real quick. And he keeps his shoulders square. He's not even really dropping back. He's just surveying the field. Oh, there's Ingram. Boom. And that play right there, or that player, is the kind of player that is giving the 49ers fits right now. Their coverage, they want to get home on the quarterback on a 3-step drop and a tight end that's floating. The ball's coming out so quick that you should not even think about getting to the quarterback. The coverage has got to be hugged up tight on Ingram and all the underneath stuff. To me, if the Niners win that matchup against Ingram, shut him down, take him away, force them to go in a different direction, I think the Niners win. If he has the same stat line he had last week against Pittsburgh, 10 catches, 88 yards or more, I think Jacksonville's going to win the game. How are the Niners going to – is it going to be Isaiah Oliver? If you're Wilkes, how are you matching up with Ingram?
Yeah, so a couple of things on this. Doug Peterson he's always been a part of a West Coast offense. So he was the backup for Brett Favre when Green Bay was running a West Coast offense. And then he went from Green Bay to Philadelphia. He was their starting quarterback to kind of bridge the gap between them going to Donovan McNabb after they drafted him out of Syracuse. Andy Reid has always really liked to utilize tight ends. Chad Lewis, Brent Selleck. When Doug Peterson was the coach of Philadelphia, he had Zach Ertz, and they utilized him a lot. And Evan Ingram's always been a really freakish athlete, very solid player who has a lot of ability, but he's a better player now at Jacksonville than he was with the New York Giants. He was a 4-4 guy with New York. That's why they drafted him out of Ole Miss. I believe they used a 2nd-round pick on him. He dropped so many passes, and Jacksonville got him on a contract that a lot of people thought was rich at the time because Ingram was dropping tons of balls with the New York Giants. But Doug Peterson has always loved utilizing a tight end. It's kind of that West Coast offense and the backbone of it, or at least a very important element to it. And you think back to that Minnesota game, San Francisco had absolutely no answers for TJ Hawkinson. And then Irv Smith, before the bye week with Cincinnati, they had no answers for him. And the Niners have a slot nickel cornerback problem. They're really missing Jimmy Ward this year. I thought that Isaiah Oliver was going to be a solid option. He's been putrid. Second worst rated cornerback in the NFL. And over the last 4 games, on 8 targets, he has allowed 8 catches for a completion rate. Easy math. I failed elementary algebra in college. That's 100%. And throughout the season, he's giving up a completion percentage of about 86%. And teams against the Niners during this 3-game losing streak, they understand that the Niners have a lot of dogs up front. They're mitigating that pass rush by getting rid of the ball quickly so that the pass rush is not able to get home. It's a tall week for Jair Brown to try to guard Evan Ingram, but I might experiment with it a little bit. There's also this with Jacksonville, and this kind of goes into how they utilize Evan Ingram. Trevor Lawrence has been really good against zone coverage this year. He's number 1 in QBR at 77, second in completion percentage at 76%, and 4th in EPA on passes. Against man, though, those numbers dropped to 24th in QBR, 22nd in completion percentage, and 21st in EPA per passes. And on some of those clips that we just showed you from Brian Baldinger, Evan Ingram is finding that soft spot in the zone, and he's that security blanket for Trevor Lawrence. So I'm not sure who's going to be able to guard a player like him because Oliver doesn't have the speed or the coverage ability to stick with him. Do you go with Demo in the slot a little bit and you try to go Ambry Thomas on the outside? That's why you and I were talking about San Francisco adding a corner going into the deadline. But this is going to be a tall test, and I'm with you. Like, this could decide the game because that just allows Jacksonville to extend possessions and move the chains and keep the Niners offense, which has struggled to find and maintain a rhythm during this 3-game losing streak, on the sideline. And I think that when Kyle Shanahan isn't able to find that groove, he doesn't see the game as clear. I think that him as a play caller changes because he gets a little bit more tense because he just wants to make something happen. And this Niners team offensively is a team that's been pressing over the last couple of weeks. I think that's been pretty noticeable.
I think you got to muddy everything up in front of Ingram. So wherever Ingram is on the field, maybe you want to play some stunting games up front so that you're flashing the quarterback's face. Maybe you want to drop a linebacker into that hook zone and kind of make him at least aware that
all pro Fred. That's your
Fred,
assignment this week. Maybe just tail him all day.
Yeah, just and just put yourself, it's like in basketball, stay between the man and the bucket. In this case, stay between the quarterback and Ingram. And don't allow Lawrence to have the easy throws, because not only does he go to this guy, and not only does the guy have ability to run after the catch, but a lot of these throws are not that challenging for Lawrence.
Yep.
They're just real easy throws. And Jacksonville has so much speed on the outside with Ridley and Kirk that you're worried about them beating you down the field, but they don't make explosive plays or nearly as many as you would think, considering they have the speed that they do. They're moving the ball up and down the field with Ingram. They're dominating the time of possession. And, and Ingram's a major part of what they do. I think you got to somehow figure out a way to, bracket coverage him, change the look in front of him, try to flash some defenders across Lawrence's face, try to muddy that picture for him, because if he's just got a clear beeline to this big, fast, tight end in motion, they're going to play pitch and catch all day. And, Bosa, you could have Bosa, Chase Young, you could have, Charles Haley, Fred Dean, you can take any edge rushers you want. If a guy's getting it out in 2.4 seconds, you're not getting him. When I asked Bosa, I asked him, I said, what do you do to stop Lawrence or any quarterback who gets the ball out in 2.4 seconds? And he's like, you stop the run, you stuff the screens, the RPO game, the quick game, and you try to force him to play quarterback from the pocket and go through progressions. And then at that point, you can talk about sacking him. But that's something the 49ers have not done. They have not stopped the run. And so stopping the run, I think, is going to be, it's obviously the first thing on defense every week, no matter what opponent you're talking about. But for the 49ers, Chase, it's even more vital that they, for the first time in weeks, really stop the run on first and second down.
Yeah, and going back to some of those clips from Baldy, who does a fantastic job, by the way. I love the Baldy's breakdowns. How they utilize Ingram a lot of pre-snap movement. And they're trying to identify there oftentimes, is the defense playing man? Is the defense playing zone? And I just threw out the zone man splits and how Trevor Lawrence is faring against both of those styles of defenses. When they use Ingram there and nobody's following him, he's going to try to find that soft spot. And Trevor Lawrence pre-snap with that recognition knows, look, there's a little bit of a gap here in that defense. I know that Ingram's going to be able to settle down there. I'm going to dump it off to him in 2 seconds. We're going to mitigate the pass rush. They can't get home. And then Ingram can use that elusiveness and speed in the open field to turn a 5-yard throw into a 20-yard gain. And those are really momentum changers. But going back to stopping the ground game, ETN is a very solid player, and a part of that West Coast offense that Doug Peterson has come up with and now he implements with Jacksonville, or at least elements of it, with a little RPO in there as well. They run the football very successfully, and ETN is a very good back, and he can gash you, and he can take over games as well. And I think that Steve Wilkes has partially come under fire, and Kyle Shanahan's been disappointed in his style of defense because he's looking at a team that returns pretty much everybody outside of Jimmy Ward from a team that was the #1 overall defense in football last year. And I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I want to hit this point home because this is going to have a direct indication and implication in the game on Sunday. Like, the Niners have gone from being #1 and 2 against the run under DeMeco Ryans 2 years as defensive coordinator to 26th. What has changed? You still have Greenlaw. You still have Fred Warner. You're missing Azeez Al-Shire a little bit. I know we pick
Samson
on Isaiah
Ebukam.
Oliver. What'd you say?
So I think they miss Jimmy Ward a ton, but I think they miss Samson Ebukam setting the edge up front.
Setting the edge. DJ Jones in 2021 was very good against the run.
Great.
Last week we talked about Hargrave and how I had warned people 11 sacks are great. He's not really a good run stuffer. That is not his forte. And I think that change along the interior defensive line has changed a little bit too. But also at the same time, how many times did we see Nick Bosa miss tackles in the backfield against Cincinnati when he had an opportunity to set the edge and he whiffed on Joe Mixon? Yeah. And what really bothered me is that you're the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. And at the end of that game, you have to keep the Bengals out of the end zone. He has an opportunity to stop Mixon in the backfield, whiffs on the tackle. Then he's like, where's everybody else? It's like, Bosa, you got to make that play. So that's an example of the players just not playing up to their standard. But man, if they get gashed again in the ground game, this could be a long day, because then Trevor Lawrence is just going to be able to sit back there and pick you apart through the air with all those weapons.
What is going to be the impact of Chase Young?
I think that Chase Young is going to play a lot. He was with Bosa at the facility throughout the bye week. He's now listed on the Niners depth chart that the organization issues as the starting defensive end opposite of Nick Bosa. And I know that everybody gets enamored with sacks. They're fun. They're a sexy stat. One of the underrated elements of this Chase Young trade, and why I think San Francisco traded for him, is his ability to be a run stuffer and to set the edge. He's actually a pretty good run defender on top of being a very good pass rusher. So I think that we could potentially see his impact be felt immediately for this team. And I think that when you have Chase Young as your starter, that just makes your depth a little bit better as well. Cleveland Ferrell, he's a backup at this point. That was a bad pick by the Raiders. But if he can kind of be that Arden Key, Charles Omenihu, Jordan Willis type of hybrid where he can play on the outside and then slide to the inside, that's great. Not sure what Drake Jackson's role is right now because he slid down that depth chart and he was a limited participant this week in practice. But in bringing in Chase Young, helps your pass rush, helps you against the run, helps your depth. And I think all three of those things do matter, and they could benefit this Niners defense. And the secondary, it all comes down to the pass rush. If they can generate consistent pressure and finish with sacks, the back end's job will be made much easier if they don't have to hold up in coverage for so long.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I mean, everybody looks at that Javon Hargrave addition and said, oh, man, it was a great signing. In some ways, it was almost like a trade, because they signed Javon, and then they said goodbye to Samson Ebukam, Charles Omenihu, Jordan Willis. Yep. And then they replaced those guys with Robert Beal, who hasn't gotten on the field yet, barely got on the field at Georgia. He's a 4-4 edge rusher, but very raw, very, I mean, this guy's worlds away from making an impact, it seems. Yeah. Cleveland Farrell is just downright slow. Great guy, good against the run, but can't run the loop and doesn't get there. Kerry Hyder's no longer here, but Kerry Hyder was old a year ago. This year showed up. He was even a step and a half slower. They had to move on from him. Drake Jackson had the great week 1 and, basically has been dinged up and ineffective ever since. John Lynch made the point this week that they don't want to give Drake any more snaps. So in other words, he hasn't been earning them. So they're they got Hargrave, and Hargrave, gives you a little pass rush, but he's not great against the run inside. And then you try to replace all these, vital pieces on your defense, Azeez and Ward and all these guys. Emmanuel Mosley was really good as a cornerback setting the edge in the run game, believe it or not. So they've lost some really good run defenders. And now, as you said, they're not nearly as good against the run. And if they can't stop Etienne, they're going to lose this game because Jacksonville has too many weapons. Lawrence can do too many things. If Etienne, who comes in averaging 3.9 a carry, averages 5.5 a carry or something like that, Niners are going to lose this game, and it's going to be 4 losses in a row. I want to ask you, let's flip the card and talk a little bit about the 49ers on the other side of the football. This is Alex Smith from earlier today, I believe, talking about Brock Purdy. Purdy, by the way, for those who don't know, I believe is second in the NFL right now in QBR or something like that.
Yeah, Josh Allen's first.
Yeah, he leads the NFC in quarterback rating, I should say, not QBR. And he's second in the NFL, 105.4 quarterback rating. Here's Alex Smith, who knows a little something about quarterback as well, on Purdy.
Absolutely nonsense. As bad as he's been in the last, the talk of Brock Purdy being the problem is absolutely nonsense. As bad as he's been in the last 3 weeks, which again, this is a guy that didn't throw an interception the first 5 weeks. Yes, he's thrown 5 in the last 3 weeks. And I know there's some of them been questionable and the concussion. There's been some goofy things. He's still second in the NFL in QBR. And more importantly, when you turn on the tape, this guy routinely makes ridiculous plays in the passing game. Look routine. Exactly that. Like he does it week in and week out. There are multiple pass plays every single week that you look at that are like, man, this guy's a 6-year, 7-year veteran. Like he's playing at that level. And I think sometimes we unfairly compare him to those guys. We unfairly compare him to where Dak Prescott is and Jalen Hurts and some of these guys that he's going to have to play in the NFC. We don't forget, listen, what has he played? 13 games, right? Like his real comparisons are Pickett and Ritter and Malik Willis and Matt Corral and Sam Howell. Like these are the guys that he got drafted with that were drafted ahead of him. And he is light years ahead of them. He is not the problem. They're going to get Deebo back. They're hopefully going to get Trent Williams back. Like that's going to help. And for me, far more question marks about this defense, but I still think they're going to get figured out. They're too good. I love that they added Chase Young here to kind of solidify that defensive front. I think he's going to add to it. I think they're going to get it dialed in. Problem is they've kind of dug themselves a little hole, certainly to try to go get that bye, the number 1 seed in the bye. I mean, the Eagles obviously a couple of games out in front, and that's obviously such a big advantage come January.
All right, a little bit of Alex Smith. I love Alex Smith just because I think he's very cerebral. He's an independent thinker, but he really hits on the fact that, people do compare Purdy to all these guys that have way more experience, and he's right. I mean, if you really compared him to the young quarterbacks that he came out with, he's so far ahead of them, you wouldn't even make the comparison. But I think one of the things that is key is Jacksonville, if you look at their defense, Chase, they've allowed the fewest explosive plays in the NFL. And they play a lot of zone, as you mentioned. So I think in this game, Brock Purdy's going to have to show increased patience. I think he was a little impatient against Minnesota, a little impatient at times against Cincinnati. He's going to have to just manage the game, show a little bit more patience. And I think Shanahan needs to show a little bit more patience, not only for the effectiveness of the offense. I think if the 49er defense is going to have a revival, it's going to take more than Chase Young. It's going to take the Niners playing complementary football on the offensive side and giving their defense a little bit of a break and trying to possess the ball for a few more minutes just to keep that defense on the sidelines. Right now, Bosa has been averaging over 60 snaps a game the last 3 weeks. They got to bring that number down.
Yeah, and I'm usually a fan of if you win the coin toss to defer. I think that it can be a complete momentum changer. If you score at the end of the half, then you get the ball to start the third quarter. If I'm San Francisco, you're coming out of the bye. Kyle Shanahan is really good coming off the script. You've had an opportunity to kind of survey and scan what you've done well and what you haven't done well. I would debate taking the ball first in this game to try to set the tone and set the momentum of this football game. And if you can score first, I think everybody's concerns offensively, they ease up a little bit, and the Niners won't play as tense. And we know that when they can dictate the pace and when they can play from ahead and they can get that ground game going, the entire offense is able to open up. So I think that's an interesting strategical decision that maybe San Francisco is thinking of here. And for Purdy, look, I wanted to get into sports broadcasting when I was 5 years old because when I was like 4 or 5, I just saw this unique way that sports brought people together. And then once September 11th happened, you really got to look at that. And it's special, right? But fan stands for fanatic. And I think fans are overreacting a little bit to Purdy struggling during this 3-game losing streak. Keep in mind that he played poorly against Cleveland. It's one of the best defenses in the NFL, and Jim Schwartz has owned Kyle Shanahan. But Brock Purdy led the Niners down to a point in which Jake Moody missed a chip shot field goal from 40 plus. And I thought Shanahan did a bad job of managing that situation where he could have gained a few more yards with time and timeouts at his disposal to make that field goal easier. But point being, if the Niners win that game, Brock Purdy is credited with an incredible comeback drive against Cleveland. For the first 3 quarters against Minnesota, he played flawless football. The two interceptions were bad, but did that happen after he was concussed? Keep that in mind as well. And then against Cincinnati, he was slinging the rock, balling out, making some incredible throws against that Bengals team, which also is a very good defensive unit and has a defensive coordinator who's had multiple head coaching interviews. So in the last 8 quarters, I think that Purdy has played very good to elite football in 6 of them. But when you give the ball away in the fourth quarter, that's when casual fans are watching. That's when everybody is watching. That's when the pressure cooker is certainly alive, and Purdy has not performed well in the fourth quarter. Shout out to him for taking accountability. He addressed the entire team in a meeting saying, I've messed up. I know I've turned the football over. But I was talking earlier, and we were talking earlier about film study and how context is important. If you go back and look at some of the throws that he made against Minnesota, against Cincinnati, some of the throws on that final drive against the Browns, he is making some deep out route throws, which are very difficult throws to make. The seam balls that he was throwing in particular against the Bengals to George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk downfield with touch, accuracy, feel, anticipation, layering those balls in there 20, 25 yards down the field, having to find a keyhole with some of those throws accuracy-wise. Those are high-level throws. So I think those are some of the plays that Alex Smith is talking about. Does he have to play better in the fourth quarter? There's no doubt about that. Has the defense done him any favors? No, because they can't get off the field, and that has made the Niners in turn a one-dimensional offense where they've become more pass-happy when they like to be a more balanced team. At least that's when they're at their best. So Purdy has kind of been put in an unfair situation as well. Deebo coming back helps. Trent Williams coming back potentially, if he does play, will certainly help as well. The sky is falling in the Bay Area right now. And I know that the 3-game losing streak looks bad, but I do think that all of these things are fixable. Also keep in mind that in 2021, this team started off 3-5. Last year, they were 3-4. This year, they're 5-3. They earned that wiggle room, and now they have that wiggle room to kind of get things right the back half of the year. This is a team that does have some mental fortitude, as they've shown. I think during this losing streak, they've kind of been a soft and fraudulent team, but they have the guys in the clubhouse to kind of turn this thing around. And offensively, early in this game, I think is really going to tell an important story, going back to my original point of taking the ball first potentially.
We got Chase Sr. in the house on our Friday show. I probably should thank the sponsor since I haven't done it at all on the show. Thanks to New York Style Italian Sausage for being our sponsor. And, of course, Marin Autoglass. Check them out at marinautoglass.com. Terrific company, 415-883-3030. And the title sponsor of the Krueg Show, Pig and a Pickle. Go get your barbecue at Pig and a Pickle, Emeryville, Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week. Proud sponsor of the Krueg Show. On Purdy, touchdown catches since Brock Purdy became 49ers starting quarterback last season, as far as receivers go. 4 for Ayuk, 1 for Deebo, none for Jennings. Are we starting to see a trend that Brock doesn't throw it to the wide receivers in the red zone on the goal line? What do you think of those numbers? Is that small sample size and there's really nothing there, or is there a story there? Is there a reason that you think that 49er wide receivers, their top 3 guys, have 5 total touchdowns under Brock Purdy?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Well, this year at least, they're giving the rock to Christian McCaffrey, and it's worked, but I think it's worked and it's been detrimental to the team a little bit because they become one-dimensional and very predictable. And I understand that Christian McCaffrey has this crazy touchdown streak going, but I always think you're more dangerous when you're a little bit more diverse and you're a little bit more multiple. That little whip route that Brandon Ayuk can run where he fakes outside and then cuts inside, that is a man beater. That is a great route to run when you're at the 10, you're at the 5, even if you're on the goal line. If you have one-on-one with Ayuk out there, run that route more times than not. With his slick footwork and great route running ability, he's going to be open, and that's an easy throw for Purdy to make just to the left there with the field less cluttered. Now, I think that George Kittle has certainly been a security blanket to a certain degree. Last 4 games last year, Kittle had 7 touchdowns. He was on that crazy stretch. A lot of them did come in the red zone. I just think that San Francisco has to become a little bit more multiple, a little bit more diverse, and spread the ball out a little more. And from time to time, can we just see a little bubble screen to Deebo with some blockers out in front? Especially with this offensive line moving downhill on some of those pull blocks. You could run the same for a Brandon Ayuk. Can we see a little jet sweep creativity, a little reverse as the field gets condensed a little bit? They tried to run that shovel pass to Kittle when Purdy threw that awful interception against the Bengals. I like the idea. The execution wasn't there. So I think that Purdy can do a better job of spreading the football around, but Kyle Shanahan can do him some favors by getting more guys involved. At the end of the day, that's kind of Shanahan's job as the play caller, to put players in a position to succeed. And I don't know if he's done a great job of that when the field has gotten condensed inside the red area.
Do you think Deebo has a big game coming back here? I mean, it seems like Deebo is yet to really get in rhythm, partially because of the injury. But, I mean, if you told me in July that Ayuk and Deebo would have the kind of production they have, and then it would all be CMC, I would have thought, no way, because Ayuk looked incredible this summer. Deebo looked equally incredible in some ways as far as his conditioning. And I know Ayuk's got a lot of receptions and, he's got a lot of yards, but he's not scoring touchdowns. Deebo's not scoring touchdowns. Are these guys going to get rolling here in the next week or two?
Yeah, I hope so. And I think Ayuk has 7 red zone targets. Look, that's just simply not enough. And for Deebo, he had that great game on Thursday night against the New York Giants where he literally looked like the 2021 All-Pro. And physically, I know that you were on the sideline for many of those training camp practices, if not all of them. One of the big storylines was he felt like he looked cut. He looked in shape, and the best shape that he had been in since 2021 when he was an All-Pro. I think that Deebo is very, very motivated. And sometimes I think that the team operates on the beat of Deebo's drum. Him and Trent Williams are kind of looked at as these leaders with swag and confidence, and they have that identity of running right through you and punching you in the mouth and playing physical football. I want to see Deebo kind of utilized like he was in 2021 in the red zone. And I want to see him on some jet sweeps, bubble screens. I want to see him used as a running back a little bit. Find a way to just get the ball in his hands a little bit And it's unfortunate that Deebo suffered that shoulder injury because that sidelined him since he signed that contract extension. He hasn't been available all that much. And last year he was banged up, just not the same guy. He even admitted he looked a little bit slow, a little bit sluggish. I think the Deebo could be in for a little breakout game against Jacksonville, but I'm looking at him as a potential player who could really try to carry this team the back half of the year. And I hope that he's having a conversation with Kyle Shanahan saying, look, you paid me that contract. I know I've been disappointing up to this point. Let's look at what we did in 2021 when Jimmy G was the quarterback, how I was used as a weapon, because down the stretch, he was a legitimate MVP candidate. Anytime the Niners needed a big play, they went to Deebo. And this year, we just haven't quite seen that. So I'm looking at Deebo to have a good second half of the year. And I think that the Niners offense could be more dangerous and better off because of it.
Yeah, and Ayuk as well. I mean, Ayuk had a great quote this week. He's like, November, December football is a time when dogs, real boys, come out to play football.
Yep.
We're going to find out who's real and who's not this weekend because this Jacksonville defense is pretty good. And you're talking about Shanahan having a conversation. I had a conversation with Shanahan, and I asked him this question that I'm going to show you right here. Here's Shanahan talking a little bit earlier this week about the Jacksonville defense. Kyle, what do you see with Caldwell's defense? They held Pittsburgh to 260 yards or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's the best. I mean, them and Cleveland are definitely the best two teams to play this year. I think they're playing at an extremely high level. They're not giving up yards. They're one of the hardest teams in the league to run the ball against. I think they're number one in getting turnovers. I think they're number 3 in giving up explosives. So they're a bend but don't break defense because they're not giving up explosives, and it's really tough to run the ball against them, and they lead the league in turnover. So it's not a surprise if won 5 in a row.
Yeah, this is a team that really takes the ball away, Chase.
Yep.
I mean, that's the concern here is the 49ers have been turning it over, and now they get a Jacksonville team that's rolling, that's feeling great about themselves, and they take the ball away. What's your biggest concern on the Jaguar defense? I mean, they seem like they've got big-time players and speed on all 3 levels of their defense. Do you see a weakness? Do you see an area that Shanahan will try to focus in on and attack?
I have a key here. So Shanahan said they're a bend but don't break defense. The numbers certainly back that up because their defense is giving up 19.5 points per game. That's number 8 in the NFL. And sometimes we really overvalue how many yards and we overreact to how many yards the defense gives up. Sometimes it doesn't matter if you're stout in the red zone. Jacksonville, 8th in points per game allowed, 23rd in opposing yards per game at 342.8. So teams can move the ball against Jacksonville. They're 18th in yards per play at 5.2. But going back to Shanahan talking about the bend but don't break defense, opposing third down conversion percentage, number 5 in the NFL at 34%. So they're really good on the money downs. And when teams get inside the red zone, they're not giving up touchdowns. So they're giving up yards, but not that many points. Opposing red zone scoring percentage when drives into the red zone result in touchdowns, 48%. That's number 10 in the NFL. And the 49ers have turned the football over deep inside opponents' territory during this 3-game losing streak. They've struggled to turn drives into touchdowns, and now they're going up against a Jacksonville team that is really good at keeping opposing offenses out of the end zone. So finishing drives and scoring touchdowns in this game, I think is going to be really, really important, especially with how Jacksonville's offense matches up against this Niners defense, because we could be looking at a high-scoring game and a game in which Jacksonville just has these elongated drives. They're able to extend them a little bit. But I think both teams' defenses playing in the red zone is a huge key in this game. And then obviously San Francisco's offense finishing drives is going to be a huge element of this ball game on Sunday.
Yeah, and you got to get Aluakon blocked. He wears 23. He's that right inside backer. He just makes a million plays. Hey, last one before we let you go. We appreciate you stopping by. We're enjoying our Friday hits here. It's week 10. I mean, it's amazing that it's week 10. I mean, it just seems like we were in training camp, Chase, yesterday.
Yeah.
And we're 10 weeks into this thing where it's the NFL season just flies by. That all being said, you know, who's your early November pre-Thanksgiving Super Bowl matchup right now. Dolphins are 6-3. If the season ended right this second, Buffalo would not even make the playoffs. Baltimore 7-2. They got a great defense. They just discovered this kid, Keaton Mitchell, out of East Carolina. They run the hell out of the football. Number one rushing attack in football. Jacksonville's rolling. They've won 5 in a row. Hottest team in football. They're 6-2. Chiefs are 7-2. Mahomes and Reed, and now they got a defense. Don't sleep on the Chargers. They seem like they're coming up. Philly has got the best record at 8-1. They're just finding ways to win. Dallas was, outplayed them last week in some ways, but couldn't win the game. Dallas is still there. Detroit 6-2. The Saints look like they're going to be the best team in the NFC South at 5-4. I think the Niners, any way you slice it, are going to be the team in the NFC West. Who do you like? Who do you not like? Who you bullish on? Give me your Super Bowl. What was your preseason Super Bowl matchup? I had Niners Chargers. And if I was doing it right now, I'd probably go Eagles Ravens, or maybe Eagles Bengals. Because I really like Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
What do you think? What did you have in the beginning of the year? What do you got now?
Yeah, so I was chopping it up with some buddies before the season, and we were jotting down our Super Bowl predictions. I think the Eagles are kind of on this pace to have like an early 90s Buffalo Bills run, where they might make it to a couple of Super Bowls and be disappointed in actually winning a Super Bowl. Maybe they get one, right? But I just think that they're going to be on this run of success for the next few years. So I said Eagles-Chiefs rematch with the Chiefs winning again. Right now, my final four is Bengals, Chiefs in the AFC, and I still think it's Philadelphia and San Francisco in the NFC. The thing with the AFC, Bengals are playing really good ball since Joe Burrow got 100% healthy. They've looked awesome. Their defense is starting to come along. That offense is finding a groove. They just have so many weapons. They can run it. And then I really think that they're like 3-4 deep at wide receiver, obviously led by Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And Joe Burrow matches up really well against the Chiefs. He's fared very well against them. The Chiefs are a scary team because the defense might be the best that it's been under Mahomes and Andy Reid. And a lot of people are panicking about this offense. Their offensive line is not good. If I'm going to put money on a coach and quarterback to get it figured out, it's going to be Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. So if they can get the offense going with how well the defense is playing, that's scary. So I like Bengals and Chiefs in the AFC. And then Eagles and Niners in the NFC. I think Philadelphia has the edge on San Francisco right now. I know that they haven't won going away. They're the first team since I think 2000 to be 8-1 or 9-0 and not win a game by 14 or more points. But I think winning close games is really important. And I think Philadelphia is more multiple than any team in the NFL. They can win in a shootout. They can win in a slugfest. They can win in a run-heavy game. They can win a grimy game. San Francisco hasn't been able to prove that to me yet. And I think that when you stack up the Eagles roster and the Niners roster, they're so even with so many future Hall of Famers, Pro Bowlers, and all pros. Coaching, I might give the edge to Philadelphia, but let's say that's a wash, right? Eagles have the better quarterback. What I think the difference is the Eagles trench play against the Niners trench play, specifically the Eagles offensive line against the Niners defensive line, and then the Eagles defensive line against the Niners offensive line. I think that could cause a lot of problems. And if the Niners don't get that run defense figured out, that's one of the strengths of Philadelphia. So Eagles, Niners, and then Chiefs, Bengals, the teams that I really like right now.
Will Goddard be back for Week 13? Niners Philly in Philly, or is he going to miss that game?
I think he's probably going to be out about 5 weeks, so he's not going to be back then. So that could play a big role in that game too, and that could decide the 1 seed. To be honest with you,
yeah, no, I would lean. I kind of agree with you, even though obviously it hurts me to say it. The Eagles' offensive line is really good.
Yeah.
And I thought there would be some age there, but man, I mean, Kelsey and Lane Johnson just keep on doing it. And Mailata is getting better and better and better. So their offensive line is tremendous. And I think the Philly D line is deeper. I think the first team Niner D line can stand up against anybody, but it's that second group that Philly has with Nolan Smith, Milton Williams, Jordan Davis, Brandon Graham, You know, I mean, they got guys beyond that. Patrick Johnson, Barnett, Jomo. I mean, they got guys.
They're also number one rush defense in the NFL. They're giving up just over 60 yards rushing per game, and that's a strength for San Francisco and a forte of them. So if the Eagles were to stop that Niners rushing attack, edge Philadelphia potentially.
Yeah, and they got a better secondary. I mean, Slay and Bradbury, and now you had Byard. I'm eager to see what Byard looks like. And, I know Bradley Roby was signed, but he's been hurt. I know Bradbury went down a little bit in that Dallas game last week. I don't know his status, but if those guys are healthy, I kind of like the Eagles secondary as well. So, it's going to be, I think Niners get them in Philly in week 13, but if you said who's going to, because I think the Niners have that game circled and it's a revenge game and they've been talking a lot of smack, and whatever big time effort the Niners can fire, they will fire there.
Yeah.
But if I got to say one team over the other, I got to put Philly a little bit over the 49ers. Chase, good stuff. What do you got cooking on the channel the rest of the day? I know you're a busy guy. Are you streaming again in a few hours?
Yeah, and I went live yesterday to celebrate 100K. I pushed out a video earlier. I kind of wanted to go in depth about this Steve Wilkes move to the sideline. Had a lot of thoughts about that. So that video is up on the channel, so you can go check that out. And then content every single day with those long form shows. And then we go live a couple of times per week. And then on Sunday, we'll be doing a Jags and Niners watch party, giving away a Joe Montana autographed jersey to our Super Chat MVP. So we always like to say our watch party is best place to experience the game. If you're not at the game, a good place for fans to come together. So check us out on the 49ers Report.
Now, when do you start at kickoff, or do you start before kickoff? Or
we do an hour pregame show usually, and we'll kind of preview the game, set the stage. We'll let some super chats come in, interact with the fans, and then once the game gets started, just some play-by-play, live audience interaction, then just reacting to the game and analyzing as it goes on.
Good stuff, my man. Have a great weekend. Thanks for jumping in on the Krueg Show. We'll talk to you next week.
Yep, sounds good. Always a pleasure.
There you go. Chase Sr. Does a good job. And if you saw that video, congrats to him and all the people at Chat Sports for 100,000 subs. I mean, just to put that in perspective, I've been doing this channel for since March of last year, and we're approaching 30,000 subs. So they're doing a really nice job over there at Chat Sports, and we appreciate Chase jumping in here. This was our spot that we were streaming with Jack Hammer, and a lot of people, talking about Jack, and I made the decision to end that stream, and upon hearing the story about Jack, so people saying, well, evaluating. I enjoyed streaming with Jack, and I enjoyed talking football with Jack, but in light of everything that happened, I felt like it was the right decision to stop streaming with Jack, and he's no longer covering the 49ers on a day-to-day basis. So that is why we had this opening on Fridays, and Chase, I offered it to Chase to see if he would like to join me on Fridays, and he said he would love to, and that he was a fan of the channel. So I think he does some good stuff. I think his analysis is pretty good. I hope you guys are enjoying some of the content from Chase Sr. A couple things before we get out of here, I want to share with you. One of the things that I love to do covering the 49ers is to go down there on Wednesdays and Thursdays and game day and just talk to the players and get a vibe for, the locker room and what they're seeing and what they're hearing and how they feel about things and that kind of thing. One of my favorite guys to talk to normally is Dre Greenlaw. And, one of the things that came up coming out of that Cincinnati game is, I guess, unbeknownst to the media, after the game, when, the players are all gathered around in the locker room, Brock kind of spoke. And it's not the first time that he spoke, but he basically just said, hey, look, he owned it. He kind of spoke from the heart, and he owned the fact that he had turned the ball over. Some picks and some two interceptions and a fumble, and that he felt like he had a huge hand in them losing the game. And because the guy is accountable and he's a solid guy and he's ascending to a leadership position in the room, he wanted to address his teammates and did. And there were several guys who talked about it this week. Chris Forster said, that that Brock's a great leader, and that he didn't have to speak up and say something, but it's great that he did. He didn't think, Chris didn't think like it was contrived in any way. He thought it was very from the heart. Anyway, I asked Dre Greenlaw about it, and here's what Greenlaw had to say yesterday when I had a chance to talk to him about it. Let me see if I can get this. There we go. Here we go. Here is me and Dre Greenlaw yesterday in the locker room.
Forster was saying after the Bengal game that Purdy kind of talked and said, kind of took ownership for some of his mistakes. He's your locker mate. You talk to him probably a lot. Do guys need to do that? I mean, do you need to hear guys say, hey, man, it's on me? Or is that him, a young player, Dre, kind of establishing himself as a leader in the room?
I think anytime, you don't feel like you play your best game, you feel like you let the team down. And he didn't do that by any means. He didn't let the team down at all. But just the leader that he is and the way that he's growing, I think that he felt like that he needed to do that. I mean, and just by the way the game had went. So, I mean, it was good, honestly, just seeing him do that. Not that he needed to, but the fact that he's so bought in and that he do care for the team. You don't hear him say much. So when he said that, it was kind of like, it wouldn't seem like, it's your fault or anything like that. But it was kind of like, okay, he's kind of forming him to a leader to where, he knows that he has to play just like any of us do. So it's kind of cool to see that from a young guy, be able to step up and say that, hey, I'm going to be better. And that's what we need from every young guy on the team. But, I mean, just him being in the position he's in and the leader that he is, it's good to see it.
So a little bit there from Dre Greenlaw. And, I think that was interesting to hear, just the fact that, Brock stood up and said, hey, you know what, guys, I got to be better. It's not about pointing the fingers at other people. If anybody could learn from Brock Purdy, it would be Zach Wilson, who, may have lost his locker room support a year ago when he came out and said, I thought the offense played pretty well, and they clearly didn't. It's like, even if you thought you played well, it's really important that you, as a leader, try to take the blame, and that's how you lead guys. That's how guys follow you, is when you put it on your shoulders and you say, it wasn't them, it was me. I got to be better. I got to be the guy. So I just thought it was an interesting kind of moment in Brock's maturation as a locker room leader with the 49ers, and we'll see where it goes this week. I do think patience is going to be crucial in this game because the Jags do play zone. There's going to be stuff underneath, and the 49ers just have to be patient. I think it plays right into their hands if Jacksonville comes out in somewhat of a soft zone, because the 49ers need to possess the ball. Bottom line, the Niners have to possess it. If the Niners are going to help their D, they got to get their defense off the field for at least 15 plays that they're right now on the field for. They've got to protect their defense. They got to start playing complementary football. It's not just offense in a vacuum, defense in a vacuum. It's offense, possess the football to keep your defense on the sideline. Why do I say this is important? Because it's not the same defense as last year. Last year, the 49er defense had all kinds of depth all throughout. They don't have that depth this year. I mean, think about it. Every position on this 49er defense is maybe, better at the starting spots in some spots, but the depth isn't there. I mean, the first team D line of Chase Young, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa, that's better than what they had last year. But then when you get to the twos and you got Cleveland and Javon and Givens and Gregory and Kalia, you're missing Ebukam badly. You're missing a Menahue badly. You're missing some Jordan Willis. You miss those guys. So, they don't have quite the depth up front. Last year, they had Greenlaw and Warner. This year, they've got Greenlaw and Warner. But last year, their third best linebacker was Azeez Al-Shaair. Azeez Al-Shaair is making 15 tackles a game right now for the Titans. And the Niners are going with Oren Burks, who was signed to be a special teamer. So they have D. Winters, they have Jalen Graham, but they've decided those guys are too young and too raw to even be activated. So I really personally think they ought to activate Jalen Graham and put him on the field. But they don't. They're going with Oren Burks and Demetrius Flanagan Fowles, and they're not as good at linebacker as they were a year ago. A year ago, they had Jimmy Ward. They had Emmanuel Mosley. This year, they don't have those guys. Now, they drafted Jair Brown, but he doesn't get on the field. George Odom's more of a special team guy. They cut Deshaun Jameson. Their depth at corner is not what it was. Mooney, Ward, Lenore, and now Isaiah Oliver. Going from Jimmy Ward to Isaiah Oliver is a step down. It's hurt this defense badly. Oliver's not as physical against the run. He's not the hitter. He's not the intimidator. He doesn't strike people, and he's not the coverage guy. So, this defense, people talk about, well, the 49er offense has scored 17 points a game. There's no doubt. I mean, it's been a combination of things. Their offensive line's not doing a good enough job opening run lanes. In the 3 losses, they're not running the ball effectively between the tackles. I'd like to see more of Jordan Mason. Brock has turned it over 5 times in the last 3 games. That's hurt them dramatically. But the Niners are still a top-tier offensive team statistically, but defensively, they're 15th DVOA. And they're not quite as good now on all 3 levels. Can Chase Young and Randy Gregory, as the next couple games come along, start to show what they've got and add some ability there? Is Dre Greenlaw fresh coming off a bye week? He admitted to us that he took a shot in the shoulder and in the ankle, and that neither shot had any real effect in that Bengal game, and he probably shouldn't have been out there. And even Shanahan said he probably shouldn't have been out there. How many weeks can we watch of the 49ers giving up almost 5 yards a carry before Jalen Graham is activated? I'm not saying he's the solution. He's a rookie 7th-round pick, but I watched him at Purdue. He made nothing but tackles. I watched him in the preseason. He made a ton of tackles. Now you can't bring running backs to the ground. Nobody's gang tackling. Everybody's standing around watching, and this guy can't even be activated on game day for Orrin Burks and Demetrius Flanagan fouls? Really? So, I don't think they're going to make that adjustment this week, but they should. Jair Brown. Tayshaun Gibson has got some good numbers. He's a good center fielder. Hufanga, I think a lot of people think of Hufanga as a great young player. I don't see the safeties making tons of tackles against the run. It might be time to take a look at Jair Brown at some point. Are they going to keep running Isaiah Oliver out there? Or one of these weeks in the next 2 or 3, are we going to see Womack, or we're going to see Darrell Luter Jr.? So, the 49ers have to really take a hard look internally and say, okay, who's playing and who do they have? And do they have anybody who's not playing who's better than the guys that are playing? And I think that's worth an examination. I think it's very, very close. I think Jalen Graham's good enough to play. And if I was the defensive coordinator and I had running backs gashing me every week for 5 yards a carry, and I had a super fast, instinctive linebacker who made tons of tackles in the Big Ten at Purdue and made a ridiculous amount of tackles in the preseason, I'd figure out a way to coach him up and get him on the field. Because in my mind, Jalen Graham's better than Burks, better than Flanagan Fowles, and he's sitting on the bench. And he's, in some ways, exactly what they need. They need another fast, instinctive linebacker who's going to bring guys to the ground in the open field. That's what Azeez is. That's what Greenlaw is. That's what Warner is. And, it's great that Steve Wilks is on the sideline and he can talk to everybody, but Steve Wilks isn't missing all those tackles. Steve Wilks is not going to wrap up. The players have to do it, and it's a players' league. And I just think that it's good to have some young players on your roster and look to the future, but you can't redshirt 5 rookies. That's what they're doing this year. They're redshirting their entire rookie class. Jair Brown, special teamer only. Graham, never active. D. Winters, never active. Braden Willis, no impact. Ronnie Bell, no impact. Outside of the kicker, they're not getting anything from their rookie class. It might be time to see if Robert Beal can give you some speed off the edge. Because I'll tell you right now, Cleveland Farrell can't. Drake is not getting it done. So maybe Robert Beal can. He's got 4.48 speed. Maybe you activate him one of these games. Darrell Luter Jr. is a big corner who's used to playing press man coverage. That's all he played at South Alabama. Might want to see if you can get him on the field. I think he's probably better than Oliver. Samuel Womack. I think if you ask me who are the Niners' 3 best corners, no doubt in my mind. It's Charvarius Ward, it's Diamador Lenore, and it's Samuel Womack. So maybe it's time to get Womack on the field and put Lenore in the slot and sit Oliver on the bench. So, the key to pass coverage is pass coverage. In other words, it's not about Wilkes. It's not about Bullocks. It's not about some coach. It's not about being in the booth versus being on the sideline. It's about, do you have athletes that can mirror receivers up and down the field? And I'm starting to wonder when I watch Oliver against some of these speedier, quicker, slot receivers, can he mirror these guys? I don't think so. Based on what I've seen, I don't think so. Let's get a couple chats and then we'll jet here. We got this one from Motor. He says, can't wait till Brock shits on the haters, and he will. Watch those chodes change their tune. Yeah, I mean, if you're not on the Brock train at this point, you're whatever. Do what you want, say what you want. James Foster said, Eagles weak in the secondary, Ayuk and Deebo will eat. Weak in the secondary? I would say think again. I don't think they're weak in the secondary at all. Now, they missed badly Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and they missed Devontae Maddox after Maddox went down. But this Eagles defense in the secondary still has Bradbury and Slay on the corners, Kevin Byard at one of the safety spots. I think that's pretty solid. Now, they went for Bradley Roby. He's now hurt. They've gotten some good play out of Eli Ricks, the rookie. Sidney Brown was the guy that was their 3rd-round draft choice. They're expecting him to make an impact at safety. We'll see how that goes. I definitely think their defensive front is better than their back 7, but I wouldn't call it a weakness. I definitely would not call it a weakness. Maybe not quite as good as their front, but their secondary, I think, is pretty damn good. And Gizmo Maltese says, does Deebo draw double teams? Is that what we miss? That's the other thing. How are they going to utilize Deebo? I'd love to see Deebo with a couple, with the ball in his hands with a 3-yard head start. These little hitch screens and they get him the ball flat-footed out in the flat. I mean, that's fine. But really, what's the beauty of Deebo? What's the advantage of Deebo? Deebo's like the last receiver in football that you want to tackle when he's got 3 steps of momentum. I mean, he's just a load. He's like a running back playing wide receiver, and he's just a very, very uncomfortable tackle. And as Kroc was saying, guys make business decisions when they see a big physical, running back size wide receiver coming at them. So anyway, I'm looking forward to this game. I think the key is going to be a couple things. Let's talk about that before we get out of here. I think the key for the 49ers on offense is to remain patient. They have to remain patient in this game. You want to stay in attack mode, but be patient. Jaguars are going to play a lot of zone. Shanahan needs to be patient. 49ers need to be patient. I think you got to run the ball with McCaffrey as much as you can, but I'd also like to see Jordan Mason get some runs. I'd like to see Kittle featured a little bit more, and when they get to the red zone, I'd like to see him throw it to Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk is the one receiver that's getting pretty good, consistent separation all year, and I like that. So I'd love to see Ayuk score some touchdowns. I'd love to see Deebo get the ball in his hands with some momentum. John Feliciano is going to play left guard for Aaron Banks. I think he'll do a nice job. I expect Trent Williams to go. He was limited in practice yesterday, but I believe, and that ankle's still not 100%, but I think he's going to go. And Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan need to remain patient. Be patient. Go underneath. Play ball control. Long extended drives. Protect your defense. Complementary football. I think the 49ers will win or lose this game with their offense. I really believe that because their offense has to be patient and they have to dominate the time of possession. In this game, it's particularly important because that's what Jacksonville's doing right now. They're dominating the time of possession. So you got to give them their game. You've got to, the chase thought is interesting too. Do you take the ball first instead of deferring? See if you can get a lead. You're so much better with a lead than you are playing from behind, that you may want to consider starting with the football. Just something to think about, at least going into this thing. I know that goes totally against the way Shanahan has thought up to this point. But to me, having a lead in this game is going to be absolutely crucial. And then on the defensive side of the ball, obviously I'm hoping that Chase Young wrecks shop. I think the 49er D-line is going to win. But the key is stopping Evan Ingram. And that's why I showed that Baldinger video of Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram is he's their continuity piece in their offense. Calvin Ridley's incredible player. Christian Kirk's got major speed. Etienne made a 56-yard catch down the seam 2 weeks ago against the Steelers that went for a touchdown. And Lawrence has got plenty of arm. But what they do is they take Evan Ingram and they move him all over the formation and they look for advantages. And Lawrence and Ingram play pitch and catch. So hug up on Evan Ingram and take him away. Wilkes talked about Jacksonville's defense, or Jacksonville's offense this week, and he's like, yeah, that tight end's a star. Yeah, he knows. They're playing pitch and catch between Lawrence and Ingram's got a lot of speed, and he's kind of like he's not quite a tight end. He's not quite an H-back. You know what I mean? He's 6'3", 240, a little bit on the small side for tight end, but he's got great wheels. And at this point, he's a veteran. They line him up all over the place. Watch that Baldinger film. You can see it. They get mismatches, and they throw it to him short. You have to take away Evan Ingram. To me, that's the number one key. And then the other thing, I think if you're the 49ers, you got to pick your poison a little bit. Enough of the soft coverage and allowing teams to make plays up and down the field. Don't let, Lawrence get into a rhythm like you did with Burrow and with Cousins. Any quarterback's going to be considerably better if they get into an offensive rhythm. Don't let them get into a rhythm. Don't play a soft zone. Challenge these guys. I'd rather see the Niners challenge Kirk and Ridley and Ingram up at the line of scrimmage and have them run by for 6 than allow pitch and catch all afternoon and, have all kinds of minutes on the field, logging, the Jacksonville dominating time of possession, playing pitch and catch all day underneath to Evan Ingram. Take that away. Challenge them. Force them to throw it over your head. If they complete one and they get a touchdown out of it, so be it. If not, the bend but don't break is breaking the Niners right now. They have to play complementary football, and they've got to limit their defensive snaps, or they're going to get to the fourth quarter and they're going to have nothing left. They're not as deep defensively, the Niners, as they were a year ago. So this bend but don't break, it works when you have unbelievable depth. But if you don't have unbelievable depth, now you're asking Nick Bosa and some of your D linemen to really give max effort in the fourth quarter on their 67th snap of the game. Guess what? Their tank is run out at that point. Don't have the same thing happen, over and over and over again. Last 2 weeks, the 49ers have had 63 completions against their defense, 14 incompletions. 14 incompletions, 63 receptions. They've got to challenge these guys a little bit more, take away the underneath, and make Trevor Lawrence throw it up top. Now, they've got enough speed to burn you for a touchdown, but you got to challenge them. Otherwise, they're going to play pitch and catch all day. You're going to lose the time of possession, and you're going to see the exact same thing happen in the second half of the game as you saw the last 2 weeks. So it's got to be a different game plan this week. Couple more here on the supers. Roberto Davis. Larry, you need a moderator. The trolls are rampant. I have not been looking at the chat extensively. I was focusing on Chase and playing some of the sound bites that we had. I'll look into it, though. Usually I do have a moderator on some of my evening stuff, but you're right. Maybe I need a little bit of a moderator. Has people been getting out of pocket in the chat? Guys, don't battle each other in the chat. Please don't battle each other in the chat. There's always going to be a little bit of the Brock, Trey Lance, that kind of stuff. I'm okay with that. That's fine. Even though Trey's been gone for weeks. But, some of it, if it crosses a line and delves into personal stuff or whatever, come on, guys, we're better than that, or at least try to be better than that. John Chisari says, Larry, Vegas knows what they are doing and is in business for a reason. The Jaguars are hot. The 49ers aren't, yet the 49ers are favored to win this game. They will win 24-20. Kittle will have a monster game. All right. I hope so. I hope you're right. I really do. I'm hoping Kittle has a monster game. I'm hoping, a lot of people are also suggesting that, that really it's all about just trying to, trying to get the Niner fan, that it's all based on the Niner fan, how the Niner fans get a wager, and Vegas is just trying to get wagers going on both sides, which we know is the whole purpose of Las Vegas. But still, I think this is going to be a really, really tough game. And when I saw that spread, I thought this should have been more like, if the Niners were going to be favored, maybe Niners -1, Niners, and it's closer to a field goal. So I'll say this: I'd rather see Vegas pick the Niners and pick against them. And that's what's happening in this game. And it's not in the NFL. This is the other thing in the NFL. We always look at what happened last week or the week prior. Both these teams coming off a bye, but you know what I'm saying. We always look back. Don't look back. It's a forward league. What happened last week is not necessarily what's going to happen this week. And so much of the public and their betting trends are tied to recency bias. And I think that's a big part of why these lines get set the way they do. All right. Appreciate that. Appreciate all you guys. One more shout out to our sponsors, MarinAutoglass.com, 415-883-3030. Thank you to them. If you shatter a windshield, crack a windshield, they'll come out, pop it out, pop in the new one, glaze it in, sweep away the glass. It's a great company, MarinAutoglass.com. The only sausage I will eat is New York style Italian sausage. And, of course, the title sponsor of the Krueg Show, Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. One little pull of water. And also we are brought to you by top of the screen there, Underdog Fantasy. And this week, we have partnered with this season, we've partnered with Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy gives you a way to play alongside your favorite football team all season long. They've got their pick-em players. You can pick between 2 to 5 players, select if they'll go higher or lower on their game stats. You can win 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. Kev and I are having a really good run on Underdog Fantasy. We've been kicking butt. It's a fantasy game, but you can win real money, and we have been winning real money. Now, this week, this is what I'm going with. I'm going with Brock Purdy over 245.5 passing yards. Or I should say under, lower than. I think the Niners may have a run-heavy game. I'm going with Joe Burrow higher than 276.5 passing yards. I'm going with Jamar Chase higher than 86.5 receiving yards. In the Seattle-Washington game, I'm going Geno Smith under or lower than 244.5 passing yards. And in the Niner-Jacksonville game, I think Etienne is going to have more than 64.5 rushing yards. That's a major point in this game is, can the Niners stop the run? But Etienne, the way the Niners have stopped the run recently, and that number seems really low to me, 64.5. I think the Niners can handle Etienne as a receiver. As a runner, I think he might get closer to 70 yards. That would be my guess. So you can enter the same as me, or you can make your own pick. Sign up using that link in the description. Use the promo code Krueg, and they will match you up to $100. That's Krueg, Krueg. Thanks to Underdog Fantasy for being a sponsor of the Krueg Show. All right, hope you guys are having a great Friday. I'm going to go get some lunch and talk to my kid for a little bit. Maybe hit the gym. And then this afternoon, Dave Lombardi is going to be in the house. Dave and I will stream, I believe, at 5 o'clock, maybe 5:30. But me and the great Lombardi later today. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., the coach will be in the house, and we'll talk a little bit more about the matchup and all the stories of the week. Steve Wilkes, Chase Young, Brock Purdy, the return of Deebo, the return of Trent. So I'm looking forward to that. Christopher Byers says Happy Veterans Day to all the veterans. Absolutely. Thank you for your service to all of them. But yeah, check me out with Dave Lombardi later this afternoon. And then check me out with the coach tomorrow morning at, I believe, 9 a.m. And then on Sunday, we got Niners Jaguars in the early window, 10 a.m. That means at 1 o'clock, we'll start our postgame show with Kev. JD, I believe, will be out in Jacksonville. We'll check in with Baller, Rye, Danny. We'll talk a lot of football at 1 o'clock. So join us for the postgame. The postgame shows have just absolutely blown up. I mean, we had 2,000 people in the room for our last postgame show. So now, was that because of the Bengals and how upset people were, possibly? But yeah, we're getting tons of traction on the postgame shows. So join us after Niners Jaguars. Hopefully the Niners will have snapped a 3-game slide. So we'll either have a lot to talk about on a good note, or the sky will be falling and we'll all be burning on fire, and the Niners will have lost 4 in a row. Either way, that postgame show on Sunday with the boys is going to be a lot of fun. So thanks to all of you. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks to the sponsors. Have a great rest of your Friday, and great weather here on the West Coast. Hope you guys are enjoying some of this weather. We're getting a kind of the late fall. It's a beautiful day. So, take the dog for a walk, get outside, enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks to everybody. See you later today with Dave Lombardi on the Krueg Show. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of.